Section 1. The Sovereign, a General Model. In this section, we will start with the sovereign. Then, in the following section, we will take a closer look at the integral. Paragraph 1. Consciousness is a synthesis of two completely antithetical identities, sovereign and integral. And while it is intrinsically and infinitely unique, it does possess common characteristics that apply to all entities incarnated in the realms of duality. This is 1. We are a unique mix of sovereign and integral, but in the realms of duality, these qualities undergo distortions brought on by the body-ego social program, what I call the veils of duality. Paragraph 2. The sovereign, as it has been used in literature, is a term used to describe a king or monarch. Here's what the dictionary says. Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Definition of sovereign. 1a. Superlative in quality. 1b. Of the most exalted kind. 1c. Having generalized curative powers. 1d. Of an unqualified nature. 1e. Having undisputed ascendancy. 2a. Possessed of supreme power. 2b. Unlimited in extent. 2c. Enjoying autonomy, independent sovereign states. 3a. Relating to, characteristic of, or befitting a supreme ruler. Paragraph 3. As you see from this definition, sovereign and power are closely allied concepts. The words I highlighted in blue are related to my definition, but as you will see, my definition of the sovereign may feel a little surreal to your body-ego social program, that part of you that you identify with as you. My only suggestion is to have one self-discipline while you read this section, if not the entire paper. Guide your mind to remain open and explorative. Paragraph 4. To understand the sovereign, we need to first understand what is meant by the higher self. Paragraph 5. In nearly every definition of the higher self that I have studied, it is a singular entity, paired with a specific body, and represents the spiritualized center of the personality of the individual it serves. It is a relatively new form of thinking about the soul or inner spirit of an individual. It suggests that the higher self shares its wisdom for the purpose of guiding the individual to a spiritual realization of one kind or another. The higher self is, in every way, a counselor in the matters of the spiritual life of an individual. It posits that one's salvation is a personal process, not necessarily dependent on an outside influence. In general, the higher self is a more aware version of the body-ego and more of a spiritual guide for an individual. Paragraph 6. The higher self is not the same as the human soul. Similarly, the sovereign is not the same as the higher self. Paragraph 7. In the case of the sovereign in the non-dual realm, it is the collected identity of each dimension of consciousness, level, and each state of existence, lifetime. The sovereign is aware of the non-dual integral and is consciously seeking to unite with its state of consciousness in order to experience the sovereign integral consciousness. Paragraph 8. In the realm of duality, where the body-ego of all humanity defines our shared reality, what I refer to in this paper as the collective social program, the sovereign inhabits the mind, emotions, and body-ego, not unlike an astronaut inhabits a spacesuit. Paragraph 9. You could say that the unfractured sovereign lives in the non-dual realm, while the fractured sovereign lives in duality. The fractured and unfractured are one, individualized, infinite identity. However, the veils of duality and the body-ego obscure the sovereign and the integral, to the point where it becomes doubtful that they even exist, or if they are believed to exist, their definitions are narrowed in scope and function. Paragraph 10. The important thing to understand is that the sovereign inhabits lifetimes across species, gender, time, and space, and it operates across dimensions in each of those lifetimes. This is the process through which each sovereign is infinitely unique and individualized. The consciousness that defines the total individual is the sovereign. The goal of an individual can be to align the dimensional selves of a particular lifetime and express the core sovereign through all dimensions of that life, allowing the core sovereign, to fuse with the body ego, and to an extent, reduce the drag, inertia, and gravity of the social program. Paragraph 11. Fractals, oddly enough, are important to understand in order to envision the sovereign. A fractal is a recurring pattern, mathematically generated, that repeats at infinitely higher and lower scales. In other words, fractals appear the same at different levels of scale, but scale itself confers a special meaning to a particular level. The concept of sovereign, for example, is not merely cloned at different levels. It changes in complexity, meaning vibration, expression, and life force on each level. And this is because each level evokes a different sovereign through the social program, which itself varies from level to level of consciousness. Paragraph 12. Fractal geometry, however, is contained between 1 and 3-dimensional space. But what if a fractal in concept could traverse all known dimensions of consciousness, dual and non-dual realms? In other words, there is no dimension that can contain it. This is what is being proposed in this paper. The sovereign and the integral are fractal in nature. They are the fluency between lifetimes, a sovereign, and dimensions, integral. At whatever scale, frequency, density, or vibration that existence can be, there is both the sovereign and the integral. They are the only intersection of opposites that is fractal. Paragraph 13. I did warn you that it would get abstract. I apologize. And in that same breath, I will cite the cliché. Not everything will sink in the first time you read it. Paragraph 14. The diagram above is a visual representation of the sovereign. I acknowledge that my depiction of fractal concepts that flow between dual and non-dual realms, like the sovereign and integral, is wrong at the first mark of the pen or tap of the keyboard. Paragraph 15. The sovereign in this diagram is the collector of experience across levels and lifetimes. It is not the sovereign's only role or function, but it is a central one. Meaningful experience that is useful in deepening the sovereign's understanding of love, intelligence, interconnection, and expansion becomes the valuable and vital substance of its existence. Paragraph 16. The sovereign is a singular yet composite entity that inhabits unnumbered bodies, egos, times, places, social programs, and dimensions. It is not isolated in one lifetime, gender, planet, or even species. The sovereign is the core identity of an individual, regardless of the life form it inhabits and the experiences therein. A particular lifetime, whether as an ant or human, plant or dolphin, chimpanzee or cat, is the experience of a sovereign in a 3-dimensional, species-based reality. The sovereign experiences these various lifetimes within a specific species, body ego, a specific social program of that species, and during a specific time and place. Paragraph 17. The sovereign is the prism, the integral is the light, the lifetimes are the colors, and the levels or dimensions in which the lifetimes play out are the stage. The sovereign is agnostic as to the body-ego social program. They are all of value. Each contributes to the broadening and deepening of its understanding of the integral. guiding its synthesis to the sovereign integral consciousness. Paragraph 18. So it is, with the feather of hope that we first learn to fly. In all great personal transformations, there is an inception point, a time and place where the headwaters bubble to the surface. It starts with a trickle of water that turns into a stream, that turns into a creek, that turns into a river, that turns into a larger river, that empties into an ocean. This is the way of life under the lens of time, and while the sovereign integral is not of time, the sovereign and the integral dwell in duality and are therefore subject to time. Paragraph 19. The body ego is the temporal sovereign of human reality, just as the mind is the temporal sovereign in the mental realm. Each level, a new sovereign identity exists. The sovereign is an interdimensional fractal of individualized consciousness. That is, it moves across dimensions or levels, and while these different expressions of a sovereign may appear similar in nature, at each new level of consciousness, a difference emerges from the unique experiences of the sovereign's existence within that particular level and lifetime. Paragraph 20. One of the more notable aspects of this definition is that the sovereign inhabits other species. It is not confined to the human species. This denotes that all life is sovereign. A sovereign could be in the body-ego social program of an ant, tuna, hawk, giraffe, gorilla, dragonfly, starfish, apple tree, octopus, in addition to inhabiting a human body-ego and adjusting to its social program, and that is only Earth. Paragraph 21. The sovereign represents the interdependence and interconnection with other life forms and nature in general. It is, as an interdimensional consciousness, pursuing evolution and expansion in every reality dimension of its existence, whether the sovereign is experiencing the reality of a moth or a human being. Each species has its own species-specific reality, which includes the social program for that species and space-time. The body ego in a species-specific reality is the species interface with the social program. Yes, even a yellowfin tuna or a silver oak tree has a social program that they are immersed within. The sovereign fills, powers, learns from, inspires, and expands into the body ego, interacting with the shared reality of its species and following cues from its social program. Paragraph 22. Perhaps, at least to me, this is the most interesting quality of the sovereign. It is not fixed in time and space. It is interdimensional. The soul, the higher self, the inner spirit, the Atman, the eternal self, the sons and daughters of God, they were all fixed in time and space. That is, they were attached to a specific human until death. It was our spiritual alter ego that went on after death as a spirit being, usually, to a better place. Paragraph 23. However, the sovereign is not fixed to a particular human being in a particular time and place. The true sovereign, not the body ego, inhabits space-time, not merely a specific body ego. It does not exist in either a single lifetime or a succession of lifetimes, culminating in bliss, nirvana, heaven, or becoming an angelic teacher. The sovereign, wearing multiple body egos in multiple realities, learns the wisdom of a place and time in order to express and appreciate the sovereign integral consciousness. Paragraph 24. The sovereign stays with a particular body ego for the scope of a lifetime, and then, somewhat like a revolving door, transitions into a new body ego social program. For most, this transition after death feels like an inertia of their human life just completed. They remain largely the same in terms of their belief system learned in their just completed human life. This belief system powers their experience because the belief system creates intention. And this intention does not end when the cord is cut. Paragraph 25. For example, if I am a devout believer in Christianity, my intention is to get into heaven, be on the right side of Jesus, and reflect the values of Christianity to the best of my human ability. I am admittedly simplifying this set of intentions, but for the sake of brevity, the belief system casts the intentions for the individual as a significant part of their social program. And after death, the sovereign body-ego version consolidates their learning and then selects a new body-ego social program from an impossibly diverse matrix of realities. Paragraph 26. This gives intrinsic value to all life because all life hosts a sovereign. This is, in part, why the sovereign integral is inclusive of all things. It enfolds all things. It inhabits all things. It is all things. It answers the call as to why human culture needs to embody this fundamental premise of equality, and why our collective social program, over time, will include this perspective. Equality, in this definition, is wholeness. It is not the equality of we are the same. The true sovereign is the core identity of all life in whatever form it takes, and in whatever space-time it expresses itself. Paragraph 27. On planet Earth, approximately 110 billion human beings have been born since human beings came into existence. Now, consider nature. How many plants have lived on Earth? How many insects? How many fish? How many mammals? You get my point. Life on Earth, as part of what we call nature, is near infinite in number. The sovereign consciousness has been shaped through human life forms, and nature, if it were not, how could the integral exist? Paragraph 28. The sovereign is the student of duality. It is as much the confused human as the enlightened soul. For what purpose does the sovereign journey into a life form? To learn, to experience, to understand, to embody the integral perspective? The sovereign is always in the state of expansion to the integral, even when the body-ego seems bent on tribalism and competition. Paragraph 29. A critical element in the definition of the sovereign is the level of intelligence that we place on the unfractured sovereign, the collected identity. The soul was created in the image of humans. That is to say, that the soul is essentially a good version of us that just happens to live eternally, and just happens to share occupancy with our body-ego on planet Earth. If the soul is the creation of humankind, it is reasonable to hypothesize that its intelligence is bounded by human intelligence. While there is no IQ test for the soul, generally, those who believe in the soul would say it is very smart, certainly smarter than a human being, but how much smarter? How much more aware? Paragraph 30. The sovereign, as the student of duality, is marginalized by the body-ego social program. This expresses itself in the tribalistic ownership of concepts like spiritual enlightenment, or truth, or social value, or the best path to heaven. The sovereign is diluted to such an extent that it has become a human soul tethered to one body, one species, at one time, with one goal: live in eternal bliss. The sovereign's intelligence is of a different order. Its intelligence is the expression of the nondual within the worlds of duality. It is the intelligence of merging the sovereign with the integral for the purpose of generating beauty, wisdom, and love. Paragraph 31. There may be some of you who, in looking around at human culture, wonder how it would be possible for an interdimensional entity with the intelligence of a sovereign as defined in this section to be so corrupted, so utterly distorted, and seemingly disempowered. Why would such an intelligent being allow its own diminishment? The simple answer is that the veils of duality enable separation from the core, non-dual sovereign. This is precisely what the sovereign desires freedom from the nondual in order to explore duality without memory of its integral nature. It can then, as a consequence, experience the full spectrum of love-hate, good-evil, win-lose, superior-inferior, and 1,000 variations of duality. Paragraph 32. The fractal matrix of the sovereign, i.e., levels and lifetimes across species and spacetime, is the defining imprint of the sovereign. We can only imagine the intelligence of such an entity, particularly as it centers its intention on the integral consciousness. The sovereign is not the phenomenon. It is the consciousness, the experiencer. The phenomenon is the integral. The phenomenon of cosmic visions or even the random déjà vu or drug-induced hallucination are not necessarily desirable and certainly not required experiences. They attract recurrence because they resonate with the body ego and carry less abstraction than consciousness itself. The body ego can become somewhat addicted to phenomenalistic experience seeking it as a means to satisfy the glamour seeking of the ego or to establish a sense of proof for the mind. Paragraph 33. The sovereign perceives life as an expansion of identity that deepens understanding initially through the curiosity of phenomenon. However, this curiosity gives way to the mental models of pure consciousness. The expansion of identity can be nuanced so finely as to be perceived as no change, and again, it is because this is an internal shift of consciousness. Not phenomenon, not the stories of phenomenon, but the subtle changes in one's consciousness and perspective that nourish the integral. Each of us, as sovereigns, are feeding the integral consciousness within us, and also outside of us through our personal social program. Paragraph 34. Consciousness is the one thing that we always are. Our body ego will dissolve back into nothingness, but the sovereign that is us is always existent, always experiencing. It is our presence in this world that carries on. It is that eternal flame of curiosity that we are each a part of. It is as much our origin as it is our destiny. Paragraph 35. Yet the attention it attracts from the body ego in most of us is trifling at best when compared to the time and attention we pay to our body ego. The attraction of the sovereign to the body ego can only be felt and imagined by the body ego. This is why the practice of the heart virtues is important, because through them we can access the noble mind and utilize the imaginative faculty therein, allowing us to imagine the subtle finery of the sovereign consciousness and inviting it into our body ego as an equal. Paragraph 36. The diagram above represents the process of unfoldment as it pertains to the dual realms and the sovereign's experience through the body ego of innumerable lifetimes, levels, and species. The sovereign is the activation point of the body ego in each specific lifetime. However, the body ego has free will to reject its invitations of expansion and reality testing. The sovereign is the activational current that sparks the interest of the body ego in the sovereign perspective, and from the insights therein, the body ego can then reinterpret its personal and collective social program. Similarly, the integral is what activates the sovereign to expand into an alignment with its energy and culture. It is the sovereign integral that activates the integral to amplify its attraction to the sovereign, in effect, to encourage it to build a culture of the sovereign integral within the species. One sovereign at a time, knowing that these maps and models, at whatever resolution they appear, attract the activated sovereign. Paragraph 37. There needs to be a relative balance between the sovereign and the integral. Otherwise, there could be sovereigns who are ready, but the integral is too undeveloped in the culture that the sovereigns must wait, attaching themselves to familial beliefs or delaying the expansion of their belief system. Similarly, the integral could be strongly magnetic, yet there are very few sovereigns who are activated and willing to experience and express the integral. They lack readiness because they are indifferent to the attraction of the integral, in that they desire to live exclusively in the body ego. Paragraph 38. This balance is fundamental to the activation of the unfoldment process, which then stirs the inception point for the sovereign integral consciousness to manifest in the realms of duality. We begin to imagine the imaginary being, whose presence in our life emerges through our sovereign and can be experienced and expressed through the body ego and our social program. Paragraph 39. The body ego, once activated by the sovereign, particularly as technology accelerates and compresses time, needs patience, tolerance to challenge, replenishment of commitment, and time to contemplate. These qualities support our persistence to deepen and expand our understanding of the sovereign integral consciousness. These are admittedly highly abstract ideas, and it is easy to feel that they are irrelevant to our world. However, the threads of understanding that I am attempting to weave in this paper are fundamental. They seem abstract, but they are pointing to the essence of existence. We will now explore the integral and its purpose.